There are moments in history when the universe feels like it's whispering directly to us. And the latest images from the European Space Agency might be one of those moments. Hidden behind layers of routine data, quiet official reports, lies something that shouldn't exist. A pattern that doesn't belong to randomness, a movement that seems deliberate. They call it EI Atlas, the third known interstellar visitor ever captured entering our solar system. But what these new images reveal is making even the most seasoned astronomers fall silent. In early October 2025, a series of high-resolution frames from ESA's solar orbiter began showing geometric distortions near the object. Not dust trails, not reflection errors, but something that looked structured. Some say it's plasma resonance, others whisper about engineered motion. But behind every theory, one question quietly grows louder. If these images are real, how long do we have before whatever's coming arrives? Tonight, we begin this journey, not in fear, but in deep curiosity, to understand what might be unfolding above our heads, beneath our understanding. It began, as these stories often do, with a signal no one expected, a brief, distorted anomaly that appeared in ESA's routine telemetry logs late one September night. The data was ordinary until it wasn't. Within a few minutes, the team monitoring 3i Atlas noticed a pattern of pulses repeating with mathematical precision. It wasn't noise, at least not the kind caused by faulty instruments. It carried rhythm, intervals too consistent to be accidental. Some scientists dismissed it as cosmic interference, yet others leaned closer to their screens, whispering the same quiet question. Why now? When those first readings came through, the signal repeated 3 times, like a knock from deep space that refused to be ignored. Engineers checked everything. Software, frequencies, ground stations, all clear. The timing matched perfectly with the moment Atlas crossed a region known as the heliospheric current sheet, the invisible electrical boundary dividing the sun's magnetic hemispheres. That's when things started to get stranger. Because just as that signal peaked, a flare of electromagnetic activity rippled across multiple satellites simultaneously. The odds of random interference aligning so precisely, astronomically small. Yet there it was, a whisper from a visitor that by every natural law shouldn't have had a voice at all. Hours later, the data vanished. The file, archived automatically by ESA's servers, was mysteriously corrupted. No error message, no log trail, just a gap where information used to be. And in science, gaps are louder than answers. Researchers began reaching out across networks, quietly comparing notes and finding the same pattern. Instruments reacting not to light or heat, but to frequency. Something about 3i Atlas was pulsing energy, subtle, structured, almost alive in its consistency. The first whispers began spreading within the astrophysics community. What if the signal wasn't an accident? What if it was the natural heartbeat of an object forged in another star system? Or a pattern written by physics we don't yet understand? The difference is thin, but as one scientist put it, either answer means we're about to learn something enormous about the universe, or ourselves. On October 3rd, without fanfare or press release, ESA uploaded a dataset labeled SOLAR B 2025 RAW Sequence 17. Buried deep within their open-access server, the files contained hundreds of unfiltered images captured near the sun's glare. And in those frames, hidden by light distortion, was 3i Atlas. The upload went unnoticed for 48 hours before amateur astronomers stumbled upon it. That's when the quiet corners of the internet began to stir. The first reaction was disbelief. A glowing structure appeared where no structure should be. Faint lines forming around the object, like a cage of light bending under tension. Some called it a lensing artifact, others said it was a digital compression issue. But when independent researchers enhanced the data, the geometry held. Straight lines in a place where nature favors chaos. That's when whispers turned into questions ESA didn't seem eager to answer. Soon, image analysts across Europe began pulling night shifts, comparing the new data set with earlier captures. The differences were undeniable. 3i Atlas wasn't behaving like a simple interstellar rock. It was emitting faint bursts of infrared radiation that came and went in rhythmic patterns. That rhythm again. ESA remained publicly silent. Internally, though, sources described heightened review protocols, which is polite language for "we've found something, but we're not sure what it is yet." Emails leaked to journalists hinted that multiple research groups were instructed not to speculate publicly until the data could be verified. But in the age of shared cloud folders and digital curiosity, silence only fuels intrigue. By the end of the week, the images were everywhere, dissected, debated, color-enhanced, and re-uploaded. Every frame seemed to reveal more questions than answers. And quietly, under all the speculation, one realization began to settle in. This wasn't just an interstellar object passing through. It was doing something, something deliberate, or at least something patterned. When astronomers study comets, they know what to expect. Sublimation, dust jets, gentle outgassing as the sun's heat awakens their frozen cores. But 3i Atlas was rewriting those rules. Its brightness didn't follow normal solar distance curves. It flared, dimmed, then flared again, as though responding to something invisible. The data curve looked like a heartbeat more than an orbit. Early models failed instantly. Simulations crashed because the object's acceleration didn't match gravitational predictions. Something else was pushing it, a subtle but measurable deviation. The object was changing course ever so slightly in ways no comet's outgassing could explain. Either it's venting with impossible precision, one researcher noted, or it's interacting with forces we don't yet map. Both possibilities were equally thrilling and terrifying. ESA's magnetometers began registering electromagnetic spikes synchronized with Atlas's fluctuations. That kind of coherence doesn't happen in chaos. It hinted at interaction, perhaps resonance with the sun's current sheet. Some began to suspect plasma behavior at a scale unseen before, a comet behaving like an antenna, transmitting, receiving, responding. What could it possibly be reacting to? Old debates resurfaced. Plasma cosmology, forgotten fringe theories, and Alf Venn's electrical universe concept once dismissed by mainstream science. For decades, they were seen as metaphors, not mechanisms. But now, with data aligning too neatly to ignore, those old papers began circulating again. It was as if the universe had kept a secret long enough, and 3i Atlas was forcing us to reopen the case. And here's the quiet truth that kept scientists awake at night. It wasn't just about what 3i Atlas was doing, but when. Its bursts seemed to sync with solar activity peaks, as though the object and the sun were part of the same invisible dialogue. Coincidence? Maybe. But the cosmos has a way of hiding meaning inside patterns that look random until they suddenly don't. It was a Friday. Most of ESA's solar team was wrapping up for the weekend when an intern spotted it first. A thin, triangular distortion faintly visible in the latest imaging sweep. It wasn't a lens flare. It rotated slightly between frames. And then, impossibly, it held shape. Straight angles in space rarely occur naturally. Nature loves curves, diffusion, randomness, but this was geometry. Within hours, the team gathered to verify. More filters were applied, more data cross-checked. The anomaly persisted. It wasn't a trick of light or compression, it was real within the data. A faint lattice, seemingly orbiting or surrounding 3i Atlas, shimmering with subtle polarization shifts. One physicist whispered, "It looks like it's reflecting intention." Another quickly hushed him. Scientists don't use words like that. As images continued to arrive, the geometry rotated out of view, then back again, like a structure turning in sunlight. Could it be an illusion caused by plasma folding? Maybe, but every model that tried to replicate it failed. The symmetry was too perfect, the angles too exact. At least 3 independent observatories confirmed the pattern over the next 24 hours, and with that, disbelief turned into quiet, nervous awe. Theories erupted across private forums. Some suggested magnetic field alignments, shaping plasma filaments into pseudo-geometric shells. Others hinted at interference, wave harmonics forming momentary standing patterns in space, but none could explain the rotational consistency. The pattern wasn't random, it was repeating with a precision that mocked statistical odds. And as one senior researcher finally admitted, if geometry this precise exists in nature, it means our understanding of natural law is missing a page. That sentence, typed into an internal ESA memo, would later leak. And when it did, the public conversation changed forever. Suddenly, 3i Atlas wasn't just a comet anymore. It was a mirror held up to everything we thought we knew about how the cosmos builds form from chaos. For weeks, Earth-based telescopes couldn't get a clean look at 3i Atlas. Its trajectory kept it close to the sun's glare, making direct observation nearly impossible. But ESA's solar orbiter didn't have that problem. From its vantage point, it could peer into that brilliance. And what it captured stunned even its own engineers. Within the overexposed brilliance of solar light, something darker moved. It wasn't shadow, it was absence. A void-like silhouette carved into the light, holding shape where everything else scattered. The filters confirmed it wasn't camera artifact or noise. The outline appeared again in multiple instruments, consistent, structured, deliberate in its persistence. Imagine seeing a shape made of nothing, yet more defined than anything around it. That's what they found. In enhanced imagery, the silhouette seemed to pulse faintly, almost like breathing. Every few minutes, the luminosity around it fluctuated, as though the sun's radiation was being absorbed, redirected, or refracted through something unseen. Scientists described it as a moving cold spot inside heat, which in physics shouldn't exist. The geometry matched what earlier frames had hinted at: angles, edges, rotation. ESA's data analysts privately admitted confusion. If the object was surrounded by plasma, the heat differential should have dispersed any clear boundary. Yet the boundaries were there. Some began to suspect a magnetic phenomenon, a shell or shield of some kind, acting like a lens or mirror. Others dared to suggest it was hollow. Whatever it was, the consistency of that shape broke the last layer of skepticism, because space doesn't make things like this, or at least not by accident. And as October deepened, more telescopes began aligning toward the same coordinates, hoping to catch what ESA had quietly recorded. But few realized the deeper question already haunting those who'd seen the raw footage firsthand. If something can hide inside the sun's light, what else might be hiding there, waiting to be seen when the light bends just right? It began as faint murmurs buried in static, the kind of signals operators usually ignore. But these weren't ordinary echoes. Across ESA's deep space network, receivers in Madrid, Canberra, and Malaga picked up faint, synchronized fluctuations, almost like whispers woven into background noise. They didn't resemble cosmic rays or ordinary telemetry drift. Each fluctuation lasted exactly 7.2 seconds, repeating every 43 minutes. Patterns like that don't just happen, they're written by something or someone obeying rhythm. Engineers cross-checked timestamps from all 3 stations. The synchronization was flawless, down to fractions of a second despite being separated by continents. That shouldn't be possible unless the source was coordinated, a single point pulsing across the void. And when they triangulated, the signal's origin pointed precisely toward the coordinates of 3I Atlas. That's when the silence in the control rooms grew thick. ESA's official stance was cautious. Natural plasma oscillations. But off-record, technicians exchanged looks they couldn't unsee. The spectrum revealed modulation, structured variation, too deliberate for cosmic randomness. The whispers weren't messages, not in any known language, but they felt communicative, almost as if the universe itself was testing whether we were listening. Some thought it might be feedback and the result of solar-wind interactions bouncing radio waves in strange harmonics. Others wondered if the object was acting like a resonator, amplifying frequencies that our instruments couldn't normally detect. But then something new happened. The whispers began answering pings. When ESA's probe transmitted a standard carrier pulse toward the region, a subtle but measurable response came back, or with a slight delay, as though the void had replied. No one declared contact. No one dared. But every person in that room felt the same tightening in their chest. That eerie realization that maybe, just maybe, we weren't the only ones conducting the experiment. And though the data was quickly archived under instrumental anomaly, some engineers saved copies, because deep down they knew that kind of precision doesn't come from silence. It comes from awareness. There's a moment every scientist dreads, when the equations stop fitting reality, when numbers that have always made sense start telling stories that sound like myths. That's what happened the week after the Deep Space Network picked up those whispers. The first models of 3I Atlas's behavior failed catastrophically. Every simulation, every predictive algorithm broke. Data that should have produced noise formed symmetry instead. ESA's internal forum, normally full of measured discussion, turned into a quiet storm of disbelief. One astrophysicist wrote, "We've entered a domain where our rules no longer apply." The message was flagged, then deleted, but not before others saw it and echoed the same feeling, awe mixed with fear. The problem wasn't just scientific, it was psychological. How do you keep faith in logic when the universe starts answering back? Across observatories, researchers noticed something subtler. Instruments were beginning to drift out of sync when focused on the object. Calibration systems designed for perfect stability began oscillating by microseconds. It was like 3I Atlas was subtly interfering with the passage of time in measurement itself. Not enough to make headlines, but enough to rattle the people who know how machines behave. The first whispers of resonance coupling began spreading. The idea that the object might be interacting with our instruments electromagnetically, perhaps even harmonically. It wasn't sending a message. It was altering the space around itself, changing how energy moved through it. And that alone could rewrite chapters of plasma physics. But beneath the mathematics, something else was forming. An unspoken consensus that this wasn't just about discovery anymore. It was about humility. The realization that we might not be observing an anomaly, we might be the anomaly, trying to understand something much older, much larger, and infinitely more patient than we can comprehend. By early October, scientists expected chaos, tumbling trajectories, random flares, chemical decay. But instead, 3I Atlas began to stabilize. Its brightness curve smoothed into a repeating pulse, not a simple sine wave, but a fractal-like oscillation that looked eerily mathematical. When plotted, the data resembled a Fibonacci spiral nested within harmonic frequencies. It wasn't random, it was beautiful. Computers couldn't explain it. Programs that normally handled pulsar timing and variable stars crashed, trying to replicate the pattern. The amplitude ratios between pulses followed constants, familiar to anyone who studies resonance in sound, the same ratios found in music, architecture, even DNA. Coincidence? Maybe. But once you see order that perfect, coincidence starts to feel like denial. ESA's data team hesitated to publish. They feared what would happen when the public saw the symmetry. So they released the dataset quietly, buried in technical language, hoping only professionals would notice. But the internet has its own kind of curiosity. Within hours, independent analysts extracted the pattern and began layering it into sound. The result was haunting, a deep, harmonic tone cycling every 43 minutes. That tone wasn't noise, it was structure, the fingerprint of rhythm hidden in light. Some described it as cosmic music, others as the universe tuning itself. But physicists had a simpler, colder interpretation. Energy systems seek equilibrium. If 3i Atlas was oscillating this precisely, it wasn't losing energy, it was managing it, like a mechanism designed to sustain itself indefinitely. And that's when the fear turned clinical, because machines maintain rhythm for a reason. Natural systems decay, artificial ones don't. And though no one dared to say the word designed, the silence between those who'd seen the data said it for them. Whatever 3i Atlas was doing, it was doing it on purpose. The photographs didn't make sense, filaments of light crisscrossing around the object, forming what looked like a faint web. Plasma physicists recognized the pattern instantly. Birkeland currents, electromagnetic filaments that connect charged bodies across vast distances. But these were too organized, too evenly spaced. If natural, this would mean 3i Atlas had become an electrical node within the solar system's plasma circuit, a temporary hub where energy lines converged. But the geometry said otherwise. The filaments weren't chaotic. They were symmetrical, almost architectural. Imagine the aurora borealis folding itself into a perfect lattice. That's what the instruments were seeing. Speculation turned dangerous. Was this a natural plasma resonance, or was it something built? A structure that manipulates magnetic fields to navigate or stabilize? NASA and ESA stayed quiet. The data feeds remained public, but explanations stopped. In their absence, theories filled the void. Some spoke of ancient cosmic engineering, civilizations that learned to use plasma as scaffolding. Others simply said, the universe builds better than we do. Regardless of origin, the effect was measurable. Solar wind deflected around the object differently than predicted. Charged particles bent along unseen pathways, as if guided by invisible roads. It was as though 3i Atlas wasn't drifting through the solar system. It was being steered. And here's the quiet marvel buried under the fear. Even if this structure is natural, it teaches us that space itself may be alive with architecture, not built of stone and steel, but of magnetism and light. Maybe this isn't alien technology. Maybe it's the universe showing us how it builds. Slowly, beautifully, using the forces we barely understand. Infrared light often tells the truth that visible light hides. And when ESA's team applied deep-spectrum filters to the 3i Atlas images, something emerged that silenced the room. Beneath the glow, a faint core shimmered, not spherical, not jagged, but faceted. Multiple planes, like a crystal turning in darkness. The data indicated temperature fluctuations far too precise for random outgassing. The object was regulating heat. Normally, comets warm gradually as they near the sun, but 3i Atlas showed patches of intense heat surrounded by cold voids, cycling every 22 minutes. The heat pattern repeated with clockwork precision, shifting from one hemisphere to another. "It's like it's breathing," one technician whispered. That description, though poetic, wasn't wrong. Infrared imaging also revealed something else: energy absorption. Instead of merely reflecting sunlight, the object seemed to take it in selectively, converting radiation into something else. But into what? Some suggested ionization fields, others speculated exotic materials. A few dared to mention controlled plasma reactions. But the data didn't fit any single model. When the analysis report reached the ESA board, the official summary said only one thing: thermal irregularities under review. But buried in the appendix was a single redacted line: evidence of coherent thermal modulation consistent with intelligent feedback. It wasn't proof, it was a whisper, a scientist's quiet rebellion against bureaucracy. And that whisper became legend within the agency, because once you see an object absorbing sunlight in patterns, you stop thinking of it as a rock. You start wondering what it's preparing for. The sky may hold many mysteries, but none glow quite like something that seems to know it's being watched. By mid-October, the object's path brought it dangerously close to Mars's magnetotail. That long, invisible stream of charged particles stretching millions of kilometers behind the red planet. ESA's sensors, positioned to study ordinary plasma turbulence, suddenly began registering shock waves, not mechanical, magnetic. The readings showed oscillations so precise that the team initially thought they were machine artifacts, rhythmic pulses perfectly timed, originating right where 3I Atlas drifted through Mars's magnetic shadow. Magnetotails are messy by nature, full of tangled currents and unpredictable noise. But what the instruments saw wasn't chaos, it was order. Waves folding neatly upon themselves, aligning like a symphony, following invisible sheet music. For 3 hours, the data held its rhythm. Then, as 3I Atlas emerged from the wake, the signal stopped completely, as if someone had flipped a switch. Silence returned. Scientists replayed the telemetry hundreds of times. Maybe it triggered resonance, one engineer suggested. Maybe Mars's field simply responded to its charge. But then came a quiet observation. The waveforms looked mirrored, as if something inside the wake had responded to itself. A closed loop. Self-sustaining, self-aware magnetism. If that's true, it means the object interacted with Mars not as a visitor, but as a participant in its field, like two instruments briefly tuning together. That interaction defied every expectation. Planets aren't supposed to answer passing debris. Yet for 3 hours, Mars did. The magnetic readings resembled heartbeat graphs more than cosmic noise. Something had reached into the planet's magnetic shadow, and the planet had replied. The silence afterward felt heavier than discovery, because in science, absence following perfection is rarely random. It often means withdrawal, as if whatever caused it had accomplished what it came for. And deep within ESA's telemetry vaults, that 3-hour recording became known among staff by a quiet nickname: the conversation. Spectrographic data soon revealed something unexpected. The isotopic fingerprint of 3I Atlas didn't match our solar neighborhood. Its elemental composition was older, far older. Traces of isotopes long decayed in our region of space were abundant in its emissions. The object wasn't just ancient, it predated the sun itself. That discovery sent shockwaves across astrophysics circles. Objects that old are usually inert, frozen relics drifting silently between stars. But this one was active. It emitted heat, radiation, and coherent electromagnetic pulses, the kind of organized output no natural fragment should produce. One researcher described it like finding a stone from before fire, still burning. The isotopic ratios hinted at origins near a supernova remnant, perhaps from an extinct system beyond our galactic arm. Yet something about its structure, its stability, didn't fit that chaos-born theory. It behaved too precisely, as if whatever forged it wasn't just explosion, but intention. Even the dust it shed was unusual. Microscopic analysis of captured particles revealed crystalline structures never seen in comets before, hexagonal frameworks that appeared engineered at a molecular level. Nature loves symmetry, yes, but not like this. These were too perfect, too repeatable. Astronomers began whispering privately about the prime signature, a chemical language perhaps, embedded within structure. If 3i Atlas carried the fingerprint of a civilization so old that even galaxies have drifted since its making, then we weren't just watching a comet, we were witnessing memory, ancient technology traveling through time, still functioning after billions of years. Whether natural or not, its endurance told one truth: the universe keeps its oldest secrets in motion. In the chaos of discovery, the world almost missed it. ESA's internal process is built on layers of bureaucracy, data verification, peer checks, calibration logs. But one simple oversight changed everything. A junior technician forgot to compress a secondary data channel, a redundant telemetry stream. That's how the anomaly escaped deletion. Hidden in that uncompressed channel was information not included in the public release: micro-variations in signal phase and amplitude. When analyzed, those tiny fluctuations formed a repeating pattern, a binary sequence cycling every 1.7 hours. Not strong enough to be deliberate communication, but far too structured to be coincidence. When the team discovered it, they quietly forwarded the data up the chain. Within hours, their access credentials were revoked. The files were reclassified, but by then copies had already circulated among a small group of researchers. To outsiders, the official ESA portal still showed routine data. Inside the walls, though, people were whispering about encryption, the possibility that the object wasn't broadcasting noise, but encoding data through its energy emissions. It wasn't proof of intelligence, but it felt intentional, like static rearranged into a heartbeat. Those who studied it privately noticed the binary sequence wasn't random. It followed prime intervals, echoing the same mathematics used in atomic timekeeping. Why would a natural object hum in prime rhythm? The simplest answer is resonance. The more haunting one is design. When rumors began leaking to independent forums, ESA scrambled to tighten digital access. But it was too late. The uncompressed data had become myth. A ghost file passed between astrophysicists late at night. And in that ghost, they claimed, lay something more profound than evidence. The first pattern ever caught whispering across the void. It started as a throwaway phrase in an anonymous forum: ecliptica. At first, no one knew what it meant, until screenshots emerged from a leaked ESA email chain. The subject line read, Project Ecliptica, Phase 2 Imaging Protocols. Within hours, the internet was ablaze. Officially, there was no such project. Yet insiders confirmed that Ecliptica was ESA's code name for a classified data reconstruction operation. After the anomalies in the 3i Atlas feed, a covert team had been assigned to reprocess all solar observation footage using new machine learning filters designed not to enhance images, but to predict patterns. Essentially, they were teaching an algorithm to anticipate what 3i Atlas would do next. The results were chilling. Within days, the algorithm began generating frames that matched future data captures with unnerving accuracy. It was as if the system had tapped into the object's rhythm, forecasting its movements seconds, sometimes minutes, before they occurred. Predictive imaging is supposed to reduce noise, but this was something else entirely. When those predictions began extending beyond the scheduled observation windows, anticipating solar activity and magnetic shifts that hadn't yet happened, the team realized the algorithm wasn't guessing. It was syncing, resonating with the same field the object moved through. Project Ecliptica was shut down weeks later, its findings sealed, but the leak had already done its work. The public now knew something extraordinary was being tracked, something too coordinated, too precise to dismiss, and though ESA denied everything, One phrase from the leaked document kept echoing online. The pattern is not evolving, it's remembering. To understand 3i Atlas, scientists fed terabytes of data into Europe's most powerful simulation systems. The goal was simple: replicate its trajectory and behavior under all known physical laws. The result was not. Every simulation ended the same way: catastrophic failure. Not due to computation limits, due to paradox. No combination of known forces could explain its movement. Each attempt led to a recursive loop, as if the equations themselves refused to converge. The object wasn't behaving within time as we understand it. Its acceleration, when plotted backward, implied origin points that moved with it, like it was dragging a fragment of its own space-time along. Physicists described it as a gravity shadow, a localized distortion that seemed to bend both space and prediction. The systems would calculate endlessly, then collapse into undefined states. The universe, it seemed, couldn't simulate what it didn't author. That's when rumors of feedback interference began spreading. The suggestion that trying to model 3i Atlas caused the data systems to fall into harmonic resonance with the same frequencies emitted by the object. In short, the simulation didn't fail because of error. It failed because it started listening. For the first time, supercomputers designed to predict the cosmos became participants in its mystery. And when machines begin to mirror the rhythm of something in the sky, one quiet thought begins to haunt the halls of science. What if the universe is less a machine we observe, and more a conversation we're finally learning to join? Silence can be louder than any broadcast. And that's exactly what followed after the ESA servers began locking down. Normally, after a discovery this significant, press conferences bloom overnight. Statements, clarifications, official diagrams, but this time, nothing. No new updates, no press releases, not even small posts on social media. Just a creeping, deliberate hush. Astronomers who usually share daily telemetry logs suddenly stopped posting. Those who did share were vague, saying data under internal review or unconfirmed fluctuations. It was as if an invisible hand had pressed pause on the global scientific dialogue. Even NASA's commentary went quiet, redirecting public attention to unrelated solar research. The silence itself became part of the mystery. Journalists tried calling ESA representatives only to receive the same rehearsed line. "We have nothing new to share at this time." Behind those words, though, was exhaustion, the kind of fatigue that only comes when people are asked to hold truth they can't discuss. Some insiders described unusual meetings, others mentioned classified oversight, but no one dared say what that meant. Silence has weight. It presses down on curiosity until it feels like gravity. In absence of words, imagination takes over. People began speculating. Maybe 3i Atlas wasn't a threat at all. Maybe it was something beneficial or worse, something we weren't supposed to interact with. Each theory filled the void left by silence. And within that silence, something else began to form. A sense of collective intuition. A quiet knowing that humanity was standing on the edge of understanding something profound, yet terrifyingly beyond our reach. Because when the voices stop, the questions start echoing louder than ever. It started subtly. A tweet vanishing here, a forum thread quietly edited there. But soon people noticed entire accounts disappearing overnight. Scientists who had openly discussed 3i Atlas were scrubbing their digital presence, removing papers, comments, even lecture notes. Some accounts were archived by curious users, but the deletions kept spreading, like a digital blackout. At first, people assumed it was coincidence. Academics often retract data when peer review demands it. But these deletions weren't coordinated by journals. They were personal, quiet, almost fearful. A few posts that survived long enough to be screenshotted carried cryptic remarks like, "It's not behaving naturally," or "I wish I hadn't seen it." Those lines disappeared hours later too. Private Discord groups and encrypted forums filled the gap. Anonymous users claiming to be ESA insiders shared fragments, mentions of mirror symmetry, radiative control, and resonant feedback. Each leak added a layer of unease. Why would respected scientists risk their careers to erase what they once proudly shared? A rumor surfaced about a digital containment protocol, a directive from higher up instructing researchers to retract unverified mentions to prevent public misinterpretation. But it felt less like caution and more like fear. It wasn't just about the data, it was about the implications of what the data might mean. And here's the unsettling part. Once the posts vanished, so did many of their authors. Emails bounced, phones went unanswered, some claimed burnout, others took sabbaticals. The silence deepened into disappearance. It was as if the closer they got to understanding 3i Atlas, the more reality demanded a toll, one measured not in data, but in distance from the truth itself. Among the storm of deletions, one file survived, hidden on a forgotten server mirror by accident. It was labeled Ecliptica Reflections.enx, an encrypted archive using a format no longer standard. A small group of amateur codebreakers, fascinated by the mystery, downloaded it before it vanished. They didn't know what they had uncovered. After weeks of decoding, they managed to unlock fragments, a set of image differentials comparing solar orbiter captures from consecutive days. The differences were microscopic, almost invisible to the human eye, but together they formed a rotation sequence, not of the object, but of something inside it. Within the glare, faint hexagonal symmetry rotated in a slow, deliberate cycle, 12 frames repeating endlessly. When they overlaid the frames, it created a pulsing visual, a heartbeat made of geometry. Hidden metadata suggested the file had originated not from ESA's main data branch, but from a restricted satellite relay, meaning someone, somewhere inside, had copied the raw feed before censorship. The group uploaded still frames online. Within hours, they were taken down. But the images had already spread, reposted across private drives, preserved in the digital shadows. Experts who examined them found something chilling. The rotation speed correlated perfectly with the magnetic pulse intervals recorded weeks earlier. It was synchronized. Whatever was inside 3i Atlas, it wasn't just reflecting light. It was responding to it. The discovery reignited every suppressed question. Was this a natural crystalline core reacting to solar radiation, or was it a mechanism, a construct designed to speak through light and magnetism? The encrypted file may have been buried, but its message was clear. Something inside that object moved with purpose, and now it had been seen. October 11, 2025, at exactly 0428 UTC, ESA's solar orbiter recorded something it wasn't supposed to see. A brief blinding flash near 3i Atlas. The flash lasted less than a second, too short for natural reflection, too bright for chemical ignition. Instruments overloaded, cameras auto-dimmed. Yet even through digital glare, the structure inside the object lit up like a pulse racing through translucent veins. When analyzed, the flash's spectrum showed pure monochromatic emission, a single wavelength, unnaturally stable. That never happens in comets or debris. Nature loves diversity in light. This was surgical precision. The frequency matched no known emission from known elements. It was clean, almost manufactured. Theories flooded in. Could it be a discharge of stored energy, a collapse of magnetic tension, or something signaling? One analyst noted a peculiar detail: the flash coincided precisely with a spike in Earth's ionospheric resonance, measurable across radio frequencies worldwide. For one heartbeat of time, Earth and Three-Eye Atlas vibrated together. ESA called it instrument coincidence, but coincidences don't replicate. And 48 hours later, another identical flash occurred. Same time interval, same spectral fingerprint. The repetition ruled out accident. It meant sequence. That's when independent observatories began pointing toward the coordinates, confirming faint afterglows invisible to the naked eye. Whatever happened out there wasn't static. It was dynamic, a deliberate cycle, like a system powering up or awakening. And as the second flash faded into the dark, something undeniable took hold of the scientific community. The sense that Three-Eye Atlas wasn't simply passing through, it was arriving. After the flashes, sensors began reporting distortions in local gravitational readings, subtle, almost imperceptible shifts, but synchronized across multiple satellites. Gravity doesn't fluctuate easily. It's one of the most stable forces known. Yet for 3 consecutive days, the readings wavered, as if something enormous, unseen, was flexing near Three-Eye Atlas. ESA's gravimetric instruments began detecting microlensing, the bending of background starlight, but not from the comet's mass. The distortion came from empty space surrounding it, forming an invisible halo roughly 30 kilometers wide. Something was warping space-time itself, but how could a small object generate such power? The data shouldn't exist, yet it did. When physicists modeled the readings, they discovered a shocking alignment. The gravitational field oscillated in rhythm with the same frequency as the earlier electromagnetic pulses. It was as if mass itself was breathing, expanding and contracting, like the heartbeat of a thing that wasn't supposed to live. Some called it a resonance bubble. Others called it containment. The gravitational anomaly spread faintly across nearby spacecraft sensors, subtly altering orbital predictions. For a moment, the sun's own pull felt slightly off. That's when the question no one wanted to ask slipped into the conversation. What if the object wasn't bending space, but anchoring to it? No one could confirm. No one dared to speculate publicly. But among closed circles, the conclusion was whispered with awe and dread. Three-Eye Atlas wasn't moving through space the way we think. Space itself might be moving around it. Astronomers love coincidences until they stop being coincidences. In late October, simulations revealed something uncanny. Three-Eye Atlas was approaching a rare solar alignment that hadn't occurred in over 12,000 years. Mars, Earth, and the comet's trajectory were about to line up perfectly on the far side of the Sun. A geometric precision usually reserved for textbooks, not reality. The odds of that happening by chance, near zero. From Earth, the alignment would be invisible, hidden behind the Sun's glare. But ESA's solar orbiter and Parker probe had the perfect vantage point. Their instruments caught the moment it began, faint shifts in solar wind patterns, plasma streams curving unnaturally, magnetic lines tightening like drawn strings. It was as if the Sun itself was responding to the choreography. ESA physicists described it as magnetospheric resonance, yet the data said otherwise. The field lines didn't just react, they synchronized. For nearly 4 minutes, the solar plasma formed a perfect toroidal arc, connecting the Sun, Mars, and the region where Three-Eye Atlas passed through. It looked like a cosmic circuit completing itself. For those who study the Sun, this wasn't metaphor. It was measurable. The heliospheric current sheet rippled in rhythm with the object's magnetic pulses. Every major instrument registered harmonic interference. But what made it haunting was its precision. The alignment wasn't random orbital mechanics. It looked like participation. Afterward, a quiet joke spread through astrophysics circles. Maybe the universe is conducting music and we just heard one of its chords. But humor only hides what awe cannot. The feeling that we might have just witnessed the solar system remembering something it once did before humanity ever existed. Soon after the alignment, instruments began detecting faint plasma filaments stretching between the Sun and 3I Atlas. Plasma bridges, delicate, glowing threads of charged particles, formed and dissipated like breath in cold air. At first, they seemed random, but closer analysis showed they pulsed in perfect rhythm with the comet's electromagnetic emissions. Every surge from 3I Atlas was echoed by a solar flare minutes later. These weren't ordinary magnetic connections. They followed precise angular patterns as though guided by geometry rather than chance. NASA's Parker Solar Probe picked up oscillations in the solar magnetic field corresponding exactly to the intervals of the earlier radio whispers. That meant one thing: feedback. The object and the Sun were interacting, not like rock and star, but like transmitter and receiver. Each pulse from 3I Atlas was mirrored by an equal and opposite reaction from the Sun, amplifying the connection until the plasma bridges glowed bright enough to be seen in ultraviolet imaging. It was stunning and unsettling. When analyzed spectrally, the bridges carried harmonics far beyond normal plasma frequencies. Some researchers describe them as plasma memory channels capable of storing and relaying information in electromagnetic form. The implications were staggering. The cosmos itself might be wired for communication, and this visitor had simply dialed in. And yet there was elegance in the chaos. These bridges weren't violent or destructive. They moved softly, gracefully, like a whisper traveling across the solar wind. It was as if 3I Atlas wasn't intruding. It was conversing, quietly, fluently, in the universal language of plasma and light. October the 18th. Across 3 continents, magnetometers, sensitive instruments measuring Earth's magnetic field, began to behave strangely. In Europe, Asia, and South America, readings surged upward at the exact same time, so 3:47 UTC, not randomly, not gradually, instantly. For 7 seconds the field spiked, then returned to normal. At first, researchers suspected a solar storm, but the Sun was quiet. No flares, no coronal ejections, nothing. The only thing moving through the inner system at that moment was 3I Atlas. And when analysts overlaid the magnetometer logs with ESA's deep space telemetry, the peaks lined up perfectly with the comets passing through the Sun-Mars corridor. The synchronization was so exact it defied latency. Instruments separated by thousands of kilometers on Earth reacted as one. That's when some began whispering the phrase, global resonance. Could it be possible that Earth's magnetic field momentarily entangled with the same frequency that pulsed between 3I Atlas and the Sun? Skeptics said no, of course. Distance and scale make it impossible. But others noticed an unsettling detail. During those 7 seconds, human Schumann resonance, the Earth's electromagnetic heartbeat, briefly harmonized with the same 7.83 Hz bass tone recorded in the plasma bridges days earlier. It was as if something vast had strummed the planet like a string. No public explanation followed, only silent observation, archived notes, and unspoken wonder. Because deep down, the scientists understood something extraordinary. Maybe 3I Atlas wasn't creating resonance. Maybe it was reminding the universe how to sing it again. Nature loves resonance, harmony hidden inside chaos. But what was happening with 3I Atlas didn't look accidental. Every oscillation, every harmonic surge followed the same precise timing, as though responding to a metronome no one could see. Controlled feedback, one researcher whispered, the term used when a system amplifies itself intentionally to stabilize. If that's true, it means the object wasn't just surviving the sun's radiation, it was using it. Its electromagnetic output increased proportionally to incoming solar flux, like a self-balancing equation. That's not random physics, that's regulation. Controlled resonance at a planetary scale. When they plotted the data, something astonishing emerged. The intervals matched Fibonacci ratios just like before, but now they were layered, nested harmonics forming self-similar feedback loops, just like fractals in sound waves or heartbeats. A physicist at JAXA described it best. It's behaving like a living system trying to maintain equilibrium. Some dismissed it as coincidence, others as misinterpretation. But when the feedback loops extended into solar plasma readings days later, even skeptics hesitated. The energy transfer was clean, efficient, no excess radiation, no entropy spikes, like a machine tuned for eternity. If this was nature, it was the most intelligent form of nature we'd ever seen. If it wasn't, then we were watching something operate beyond our definitions of life or technology. Something that understands the sun not as a furnace, but as a voice. When 3I Atlas crossed Mars's orbit again, something remarkable happened. The planet responded. Tiny but measurable electromagnetic flares began emerging from Mars's ionosphere, echoing the same rhythm seen weeks before. The red planet, usually quiet, was singing back. NASA's MAVEN probe detected oscillations identical to those recorded during the conversation. The same frequencies, the same interval, repeating with precision too exact for coincidence. It was as if Mars remembered the interaction and was now replaying it. But to what end? ESA scientists proposed an astonishing theory that 3I Atlas might have induced resonance in Mars's magnetic core, temporarily awakening dormant electromagnetic pathways. Not permanently, but enough to create a feedback signature. In simple terms, the planet had learned a tune and was humming it again. Even more haunting was the discovery that the timing of those Martian flares synchronized with faint radio fluctuations on Earth, measurable only in ultra-low frequencies. Whatever song Mars was singing, Earth could faintly hear it. The solar system had become a subtle orchestra of resonance, each body vibrating in response to the other. By this point, no one in the scientific community was laughing. Too many coincidences had turned into choreography. 3I Atlas wasn't just moving through the solar system, it was activating it. And somewhere between Mars's echo and Earth's heartbeat, a realization began to dawn quietly in every observatory. The universe might not just contain intelligence, it might be intelligence, speaking softly through the rhythm of its own light. It was supposed to be an ordinary transmission, continuous data streaming from ESA's solar orbiter during 3I Atlas's closest solar approach. But when the feed was reviewed, something strange appeared. Between 04:12:32 and 04:13:20 UTC, 48 seconds of telemetry were gone. Not corrupted, not unreadable, simply absent, as if time itself had never existed for that brief moment. Engineers first blamed transmission loss, yet the backup relay in Canberra showed the same gap. So did the secondary station in South Africa. 3 separate systems, 3 different continents, all missing the exact same window. It wasn't a technical glitch, it was synchronization. Whatever caused the lapse, it happened everywhere at once. When the instruments came back online, the readings were subtly altered. Frequency baselines shifted. Clock calibrations drifted by microseconds. Some equipment even logged timestamps that shouldn't exist. One line of code registered 04:13:21:991. System recovered from future reference. It didn't make sense. Machines don't make poetic errors. Inside ESA, a theory surfaced quietly. Temporal phase interference. The idea that 3I Atlas emitted an electromagnetic field strong enough to bend signal timing through space-time microlensing. Essentially, the instruments experienced a pause in reality, a gap in continuity, not broken, displaced. No one spoke of it publicly, but one scientist put it simply in a private note later leaked online. For 48 seconds, the universe forgot to count. And in that poetic line hid a haunting truth. If an object can interfere with timekeeping on a planetary scale, then we're no longer watching astronomy. We're witnessing physics turn introspective. As data reconstruction continued, analysts noticed something subtle in the magnetometer graphs: rotation. The magnetic readings weren't just fluctuating, they were spinning, forming a corkscrew-like waveform. It looked as if 3I Atlas wasn't a single magnetic pole, but a rotating field and an electromagnetic gyroscope turning endlessly through space. Rotation in fields isn't unusual. On planets have them, but this was different. The axis wasn't fixed. It shifted continuously, precessing around a geometric center with precise intervals. When modeled, it matched golden ratio patterns to 5 decimal points. The universe loves order, but this was artistry. As more data arrived, the same rotation appeared in solar wind deflection curves. It wasn't random turbulence, it was mechanical grace. Some described it as a spinning torus of magnetism. Others compared it to plasma propulsion, an invisible engine feeding on solar flux. If true, it means 3I Atlas might be self-stabilizing, not tumbling helplessly through the void, but guiding itself deliberately through magnetic resonance. Not rocket fuel, but field control. A technology, or natural phenomenon, that could theoretically move forever without exhaustion. And here's where the whispers turned philosophical. If the field rotates with intent, maybe it's not propulsion at all. Maybe it's perception, a way of scanning, sensing, reading the universe by rotating through its frequencies like an eye that never blinks. Maybe, in some vast and ancient way, this is how the cosmos looks back at us. Every astronomer knows light curves, graphs of brightness over time that reveal an object's behavior. But when researchers plotted 3I Atlas's light curves in mid-October, they found something eerie: rhythm. Every 12 hours, brightness rose and fell in smooth waves, not chaotic, not erratic, but musical. One data analyst decided to convert the readings into sound waves. When played back, it produced a deep, resonant hum that cycled predictably. The intervals matched, again, the same frequencies seen in the plasma bridges and magnetic rotations. Everything was connected. Then something unexpected emerged. Over several days, the rhythm shifted subtly. A new pattern appeared. Faster, higher in tone, almost like modulation. When graphed against solar activity logs, the timing aligned perfectly with minor coronal fluctuations. The object wasn't just pulsing, it was responding. Light answering to the sun. Infrared imaging revealed faint changes in thermal output following each pulse, like a body inhaling and exhaling, adjusting to the solar rhythm. Some began calling it the breathing comet, but others, quietly, began using another word: organism. Because systems that adapt, respond, and maintain balance through feedback aren't inanimate. They're alive. That idea terrified and fascinated everyone at once. A living geometry moving between worlds. Not biological in our sense, but systemic. A consciousness made of frequency and resonance. Perhaps not intelligent the way we define it, but aware enough to sing back when the universe hums its tune. October 22nd. A clear night above Cerro Tololo Observatory in Chile. Amateur astronomer Javier Morales aimed his self-built telescope at the coordinates shared through online communities. He wasn't expecting much. The sun's glare made observation nearly impossible. But then, through his adaptive filters, he saw it. a faint shimmer pulsing steadily like the heartbeat of the stars themselves. Javier began recording. His equipment, though humble, picked up light fluctuations identical to ESA's frequency logs, the same rhythmic pulse repeating every 12 hours. He thought it was an error until his second night's data showed the same pattern. So he did what every curious soul does. He shared it online. Within hours, astronomers worldwide replicated his observation. Backyard telescopes from South Africa, Australia, and Japan confirmed the pulse. Independent verification changed everything. The data was real, and now public. No longer confined to government servers or encrypted research drives, humanity was watching 3i Atlas breathe in real time. ESA's silence suddenly looked like confession. Forums exploded with analysis, artists visualized the rhythm, and musicians turned the pulse into sound. For the first time, people heard the pattern. Deep, haunting, beautiful. It sounded almost like a cosmic lullaby. That was the moment 3i Atlas stopped being a scientific anomaly and became something personal. People started calling it the messenger, not because anyone knew what it meant, but because it felt like something that carried meaning. And maybe, in a universe that speaks through light, that's all a message really is. By late October, the story had evolved again. Observatories detected a second rhythm beneath the main 12-hour pulse, a shorter cycle repeating every 4.3 hours. It was faster, subtler, yet perfectly consistent. At first, scientists thought it was instrument interference, but then satellites orbiting Mercury, millions of kilometers away, detected the same pattern. That kind of synchronization shouldn't happen naturally. It meant 3i Atlas's influence extended farther than anyone believed. The inner planets were now vibrating ever so slightly to the same cosmic metronome. Even the sun's outer corona began to echo the rhythm, faint but measurable. The universe, it seemed, was humming along. Physicists studying harmonic fields noticed something unsettling. 4.3 hours matched the natural resonance period of plasma oscillations inside the heliospheric current sheet. In other words, 3i Atlas wasn't forcing the rhythm. It had found it. It was amplifying the solar system's native song. For weeks, scientists tried modeling how such synchronization could happen. No simulation worked. The object's behavior wasn't mechanical, it was relational, responding, adjusting, harmonizing, as if the entire solar system had just remembered a tune it once knew but forgot. And when NASA's Parker probe transmitted the final readings before communication blackout, its log carried a chilling line from one onboard engineer. The pattern is still repeating, like a clock that doesn't measure time, only presence. As October deepened, orbital tracking stations noticed something they couldn't explain. 3i Atlas was accelerating, not dramatically but steadily, as if nudged by an invisible hand. The numbers didn't lie, its velocity was increasing, even though no physical force, gravity, radiation pressure, or gas outflow could justify it. The acceleration was smooth, consistent, and mathematically clean. Comets accelerate when sunlight vaporizes their ice, but 3i Atlas wasn't venting mass. Infrared scans confirmed no tail, no gas, no jets. Yet it moved faster, as if something internal had awakened. Some suggested photon pressure, others whispered about electromagnetic propulsion. But that word, propulsion, lingered uncomfortably in scientific circles. It implied intent. When the acceleration graphs were cross-referenced with its rhythmic pulses, the relationship became impossible to ignore. Every time the light pattern intensified, velocity rose fractionally, like each pulse was pushing against space-time itself. ESA physicists privately dubbed it the heartbeat drive. They didn't mean it poetically. It was as though 3i Atlas had learned to move using harmony, converting resonance into thrust. Nature doesn't normally do that. technology might. And yet there it was, a cosmic traveler, gaining speed not by destruction, but by rhythm, moving not to escape, but to arrive. By now, one question hung in the air like static. What was it moving toward? Mars again? The sun? Or something we can't yet see? Because when motion stops following force, destination becomes more than a location. It becomes intention. The new trajectory forecasts were unsettling. 3 Atlas wasn't just accelerating, it was destabilizing. Tiny oscillations in its spin rate grew sharper each day. Supercomputer models showed a phase point approaching where the object's internal harmonics would reach critical resonance, like a glass vibrating too long to the wrong note. At that threshold, one of two things could happen. Either it would fragment spectacularly or transform completely. No one knew which. Some models predicted structural collapse, others suggested phase transition, a change not in form, but in state. Like water, turning to vapor not by heat, but by harmony. ESA's scientists were divided. Some argued it was simply tearing itself apart under stress. Others, quietly, believed it was preparing for something, shedding the skin of matter to enter another frequency domain altogether. Phase, resonance, cascade, one physicist murmured, like reality tuning upward. Every time 3I Atlas approached instability, the universe seemed to react. Solar winds softened, plasma density dropped, cosmic rays shifted slightly. It was as though space itself adjusted to accommodate it. That's not physics, that's relationship. Something intelligent moves through nature when nature makes room for it. If it did collapse, it would release energy enough to be visible from Earth, brighter than any comet ever recorded. But if it transitioned, if it truly shifted, then no telescope might ever see it again. It would leave this plane of vibration quietly, gracefully unseen, taking its mystery with it. Like a thought, the universe decided to stop thinking aloud. In the final week of observation, the object began flickering between brilliance and darkness. Some images showed it blazing brighter than the surrounding corona. Others caught it nearly invisible. Scientists described it as phase flicker, but to those who had followed its journey it looked like indecision, like something standing on the edge between being and becoming. If it fragmented, the solar system would feel it. Electromagnetic ripples, radiation bursts, perhaps even auroras on Earth. If it ignited, the consequences were unknown. Ignition didn't mean explosion, it could mean activation. A transformation where matter becomes pure field, frequency released from form. There were whispers of a self-triggering event, a resonance climax. The object's energy readings doubled, then tripled, then stabilized again, as though testing thresholds. The sun's plasma reacted gently, almost respectfully. Whatever was happening wasn't violent. It was orchestral. Every fluctuation fell into tempo with the solar rhythm. ESA's teams, many sleepless, started speaking in poetic terms they couldn't help. "It's singing," one wrote, "and I think it knows we're listening." Even hardened skeptics admitted. It was beautiful. Terrifyingly so, the kind of beauty that feels intelligent. As the glow reached its peak, an astronomer watching from Chile noted a faint green halo encircling it, shimmering like the aurora of another world. "It's not dying," he whispered. "It's remembering what it is." In the final transmission burst, a thin jet of plasma was detected emanating from 3I Atlas, but not outward like ordinary exhaust. It curved backward, forming a loop, re-entering itself like a self-contained circuit of light, energy leaving and returning in the same motion. Perpetual feedback. That observation sparked the closed plasma system theory that the object wasn't consuming energy but recycling it, a sustainable, infinite loop using cosmic fields as both engine and fuel. Nature rarely designs loops that perfect, but physics loves them when they appear. Perpetual motion in plasma form wasn't supposed to exist, yet it was unfolding before our eyes. The implications were staggering. If the loop truly self-fed, it meant 3i Atlas could travel eternally, unbound by entropy. A traveler moving not to reach, but to maintain. The very act of existing kept it in motion. Some saw it as technology beyond comprehension. Others saw it as the natural behavior of a consciousness that never ends. ESA's instruments caught one final flare from the loop, a flash of ordered frequency rising exactly 1 octave above its previous baseline. That's not chaos, that's evolution. The frequency doubled, then vanished. For several seconds after the disappearance, every magnetometer pointed toward the sun went silent, like the solar system had held its breath. When data resumed, 3i Atlas was gone. No debris, no trail, just resonance fading softly into background space. And maybe that's all it ever was. It not a visitor, not a machine, but a note in the great composition of creation, played once, perfectly, before dissolving into silence again. Weeks later, a brief internal summary surfaced. The minutes of an ESA post-analysis meeting. It was dry, clinical, bureaucratic. Yet between its lines hid poetry. No residual mass detected, no active radiation, local field normalization confirmed. Translation, it's gone. But one paragraph at the bottom stood out. Magnetometer and optical sensors continued to detect harmonic resonance for several minutes, post-event, consistent with coherent field memory. Recommend continued passive monitoring of the region for spontaneous reappearance. Coherent field memory. Even the language sounded like confession. Something out there had left an echo, debris, but vibration. The memory of pattern. The fingerprint of intelligence written in electromagnetic afterglow. And those who'd witnessed it firsthand. They didn't speak publicly again. In observatories around the world, instruments hummed softly, still recording faint harmonics no one could quite explain. It wasn't noise, it was persistence, the kind of residue that only consciousness leaves behind when it exits gently instead of collapsing violently. And so the official story closed quietly. Object exited observation parameters. Nothing more. No headline, no warning, no closure. But for those who'd watched, who'd heard the rhythm in the data and felt the resonance in their bones, the silence said enough. Because maybe the universe never wanted to hide this. Maybe it wanted us to look, to listen, to remember that intelligence doesn't always speak in words. Sometimes it pulses in light, hums in magnetism, and passes through our system once every few millennia to remind us that even the coldest depths of space can still be alive with meaning,